was listening to the Iranian foreign minister basically threatening the United States with a plan B. I thought that
is also interesting.
Right, because, I thought the United States was threatening Iran with a plan B. Like, what is Iran threatening with? With bombing the U.S. nuclear sites in the United States? I mean, it's really bizarre. So obviously, I think it's to echo the U.S. Threat of using a plan B against Iran. It's not clear exactly what Iran's plan B would be against the United States. But I think that those negotiations at this particular moment are taking place in a very problematic moment for the United States, because at the same time you have those Russian threats against the U.S. in the Ukraine, demanding the removal of NATO forces from Eastern Europe, and all kind of threats from Vladimir Putin of sending Russian military presence in Venezuela and Cuba. So it is also in this context, I think, that the Iranians feel that they're confident to really challenge the U.S. and make those kind of threats of having a plan B against the United States.
Right, but there is also the issue of the Biden administration having, as you say, a lot on its plate. How much could it be tempted to look for let's call it an optical, or if you want to say even cosmetic achievement with some kind of Iran agreement?
I think really at this moment, the Biden administration cannot afford to show any sign of weakness vis-a-vis the Iranians, precisely because it is being challenged also by Russia on the issue of the Ukraine. It's also being challenged, by the way, by North Korea, which just tested new missiles, because the North Korean also feel confident. So the Biden administration has really been challenged almost everywhere, in Asia, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe. And I think that the last thing the Biden administration should do at this point is really to show any sign of weakness vis-a-vis the Iranians, and really show that if the deal does not meet the requirements of the United States, then there won't be any deal. But the threat should come from the U.S. and not from Iran.
Right, the plan B, as you said. Well, we don't know if all these talks, and despite the tone that Iran has taken, that these will go anywhere. But we do know of another diplomatic process that is moving forward that could be certainly of concern to the U.S. and definitely of concern to Jerusalem, and that is these discussions that have been going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We know that those nations broke off the relations in 2016 against the backdrop, for example, of the Yemen war and the nuclear program. But now today, 3 Iranian diplomats arrived in Saudi Arabia's Jeddah to reopen Iran's representative office to what's called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. And we should note that this is, even though it may be symbolic, this is the highest level diplomacy we've seen between Iran and Saudi Arabia since 2016. So how significant is this? How concerned, especially, should Jerusalem be how this is developing?
I think it is of concern for Jerusalem, also for Washington. We have to understand that one of the main reasons why the Saudis are trying to normalize the relation with Iran is that, first of all, the war in Yemen has been a failure for the Saudis, and it's costing them a lot of money. The Saudi state has a budget deficit, a huge budget deficit. The main reason, of course, is the collapse of the price of oil in the past 10 years, but it's also this very costly war in Yemen, which has been a failure for Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis are really trying to find a way out in Yemen. And that's why they're talking to the Iranians. And they're doing this also to send a message to the United States that, if the U.S. does not show a real resolve vis-a-vis Iran, so the Saudis will have to...
It's tying in with what we just discussed.
Exactly.
Definitely connected, as you said, with what's happening in Vienna.
Exactly. It's also a message being sent to Washington by Riyadh, which is, if you guys are going to protect us from the Iranian nuclear threat, we will have no other choice but to talk directly to them to normalize our relation, especially since they need a way out from Yemen. And this is of concern for Israel because until at least 2 years ago, there was a very clear division in the Middle East between the Shia and the Sunni axis in the region, one supported by the US, the other one by Russia and by China. And Riyadh is kind of blurring the cards by trying to normalize its relation with Iran. And that definitely is a move which is of concern for the US and for Israel. And it goes to confirm again what I said before, which is that at this point the U.S. really has to show that it's going to be firm vis-a-vis its enemies in the region, because otherwise any show of weakness from the United States today might really undermine U.S. interest in the region, but also Israel's interest in the Middle East.
I'm just going to tie this in with this earlier report of the Houthis launching this drone attack against the United Arab Emirates, the airport in Abu Dhabi, kind of raising the stakes for not only Saudi Arabia, but also its allies in that Yemen conflict, the UAE.
Absolutely. And this attack, of course, is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's really here to send a message to the Gulf states, to Saudi Arabia, to the United States. And the response has to be tough, because otherwise the Iranians will feel that they have complete immunity in that region, the Iranians and their allies, and everybody will pay a price. I mean, all the allies of the United States, including Israel, will pay a price if the Iranians and their allies feel that they're not going to pay any price for their provocations.
Right. I'm certain Jerusalem can't be too happy about seeing that development there in Jeddah that we just discussed. Dr. Emmanuel Navon, thank you for joining us on the Rundown.